Hello, Duo members. Those who attended this year's Duo conference may recall that in the last portion of the tips and tricks, we attempted to show a routine in which we can output multiple digital editions from a final approved print edition for a book. And it wound up erroring out, and we couldn't really show you the full routine. And it was frankly a bit galling since it was a self-inflicted wound. So I thought it still might be useful to put together a video showing the proper workings of this approach, and also, since we have a little more time in this format, show you some of the basics of how it's set up behind the scenes as well, since showing these sorts of things and then leaving it as, some sort of magic trick without showing you how it's actually done doesn't really do a very good service to the users. So let's see if we can get this thing to run. I know it will. And also explain some of the mechanics of it. To review, what we're presented with here is a project in which we have, a book or magazine that's put together, and the final pages have already been approved and perhaps sent off to the printer. So what we want to do now is repurpose that print edition for one or several different types of digital devices. And for the purposes of this demo, I've got obviously a simple 8-page book, since this is not an exercise in showing how fast my laptop can process these pages. And again, if we select any one of these pages, you can see they're at this stage where they've been sent, and now they're now waiting to be told what the next step in the processes will be. And everything from here on out is basically controlled through a project workflow in which we will now request what we'd like to spit out. And we're going to say, I want to make 3 different types of digital editions. And I also have this option here that says I want to return the final digital editions to the ES project so we could look at them and verify them. And when we say OK for this, what we've now done is staged this project for 3 different types of outputs. And what this affords us now is the ability to make a custom layout or flat plan for each of those different types of editions, because it's not uncommon where we may need to run different ads for those, reposition some pages, and then release for that device. So for the sake of this example, we'll say that the Kindle edition, we're just going to release it with the files in the flat plan as they currently are. We'll just say OK to that. We want to release. And what this is doing is now feeding an eTwist workflow that is going to process those files for us. You can see all those files going in there now and getting chewed up. And we really don't have to wait at this point if we now want to put together, let's say, the iPad version. Because you see I've got a folder down here that contains any extra ads or ads that we may want. So let's say that we go into the ads folder and we want to replace, say, the ad in page 4 with this file. We'll drop him in. Let's say we're going to run a different cover on this edition. So I'm going to grab this cover, throw it in there. And so we'll say, okay, that's our iPad version. Let's go ahead and release it. You'll also notice that I've got this folder here called Digital Editions, which is where the final files will be returned to when they're done, that final stitched together PDF. Now let's take a look inside of the Kindle folder, and you can see the Kindle edition is finished, it's been returned, and basically ES is making previews for us now. And let's see, we've got the iPad one chewing away, so now lastly we'll get this thing together for the iPhone. Let's say the iPhone also wants a different cover. We'll replace him. We'll put a different ad in that slot. We'll pop him in. And maybe we actually want to rearrange pages for some reason. Let's say that's going to be the back cover. And that should be good. Again, yeah, I think you get the point that you can basically completely reflow pages in here, drop in different pages based on the device we're going to output to. So we'll now say, lastly, we want to release this for the iPhone. And again, I have to think that while I've been blabbing away, the iPad version has been returned and is done. He is. The Kindle was long since done. And since the iPad one is one that we actually rearranged, let's just open him up and see that the workflow actually performed what it's supposed to do. Because the other key in processing things through the workflow is that it identifies the proper folio numbers for the pages and orders them as they should. You can see it put the new cover into place, put that second ad into place, or the different ad. Another thing that may not look like much, but I'll show you this as well, is you'll notice I also had it place some text on the top of this page. It basically says it's prepped for the iPad and puts all this information in. Really, the reason I want to point this out is that it's not uncommon that for different digital devices, you may have to run completely different routines on how these final files are going to be spit out. So the fact that we can capture any type of variable, for instance, I captured the fact that the requested device type was iPad. We know that in a twist workflow, once you have captured a certain variable, you can key off that and then get the workflow to do essentially anything you want it to do. For instance, set the output PDF tool for a specific iPad setup. You'll also see that for the, let's say I have to think the iPhone version's done too while we've been talking, which it is. So if we open that guy up, we should hopefully see, obviously, a different cover. See the back page has been changed as well. We flopped around those two. And it also still put in some different type here because, again, it identifies the requested device type, and I changed the text. But we know that capturing that variable, we can change anything we want. One of the key things to understand here in terms of how this is all done is how do we get these options to pop up when we hit this milestone in the project workflow? And I'm just going to back this up real quick to review that option that we ran at the beginning. Because this is a milestone that is set up with the option must be approved. Whenever you use that option, you get these little approve button, the green guy, and the red one is reject. But you can see that we get more than just approve or reject. We get essentially a job ticket that's related to that particular milestone. And as I mentioned during the presentation, this option called approval layouts actually allows you, if you choose to have several milestones within a ES workflow where you can pop up variable options to route files and run different routines on files in a project. It's very powerful because instead of locking you into a particular job setup at the beginning with a job ticket, this allows you to change settings or request different options midstream in a project. And so the question is, how did this thing get attached to this milestone? Obviously, it didn't appear out of thin air. So where did it come from? First, let's go to that milestone. It's called Select Digital Additions. If we go over to our milestone setup, you see, again, this one has must be approved, but you'll also see something in here called an approval layout. So there's some approval layout here, some mysterious thing that's called digital additions. What is that? That is basically Well, not basically it is. It's a job ticket. And as with any job ticket in ES, it's populated by information that's first defined as a metadata set. So you'll see I have a metadata set called digital editions with these different device types. And there's also a setting in here called return. That was that option you said you saw when we asked, do we want to return the file to ES? So once this metadata set is created, and these are very basic, you know, the selecting the button will return a true value, leaving it unchecked sets that value to false. We made a job ticket with it. And if you're familiar with job tickets, there are several different types of job tickets you can create. Some will be seen perhaps in an uploader if you're uploading files to ES. Some will be appear within a project layout, so it's an overarching job ticket that will apply to all files. But you'll see there's also an option here, and it's kind of grayed out, but it's called approval. As you can probably guess, an approval layout is one that is then attached to a milestone so that we can present these options at different points of an ES workflow. And we'll just back up one more time and look at that digital editions layout. Once we put this together, you can always hit the preview button and you see exactly what we saw when you were in the job. Now, none of that does anybody any good unless we're then able to capture the variables or the information pushed forward from there within a workflow to route things properly. For instance, when we started that job and we told the project we wanted to make an iPad, a Kindle, and an iPhone, it then pushed files forward in this workflow and checked them against these program links. For instance, if we said, yes, I want to make an iPad, it sets the value of that metadata to true. So, and we discussed this quickly during the presentation, the different types of arguments you can use in ES to program links and route files down links. So essentially, if the project workflow uses the digital editions metadata set and the iPad property, the value true, again, when we said yes, returns success and moves us along this line. And as you can guess, since I asked for iPhone, Kindle, and iPad, it went all three directions. So any one file now exists, maybe that's the wrong term, but it's essentially in three states. It has forked down three paths within this workflow, here, here, and here. And since we didn't request the nexus, it didn't follow that link. From there, as you saw, we reconfigure the flat plan and then forward them to this eTwist workflow that does the stitching together and ordering of the pages for us. And I'll just point very quickly to that workflow. Again, this was a workflow we showed at the beginning of the presentation that can be used apart from ES, just as a general workflow for creating PDFs for digital editions. And this is the workflow that also does not use the filter group tool to merge pages together, but it instead runs a specific routine where we stash files in a folder and then pull them all out when we're done. So I hope that's helpful. I know it definitely is a better outcome than what we saw the other day. And again, that was mainly due to a completely cluttered up staging area that I had with all the PDFs from the testing that I had done that pretty much gummed up the works. Uh, if there's any other things that maybe weren't clear during any of the presentations, feel free to make it known to us, and we could easily put together something else like this to get you to the promised land. Thank you.